Hi! Today Reena is thrilled because her uncle is coming to meet her after a long time. Her uncle is an astronaut and has recently come back from his space expedition. Reena is keen to hear all the stories from his space expedition. But before Reena could ask anything, her uncle started. Let me share an interesting story with you. Do you know our space agency had forgotten Newton's third law of motion during its early expeditions? Surprised, Reena immediately responded, "But how is that possible? Sending a rocket is such a difficult and genius work. Then how can one forget such a simple law? It just says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction." Uncle continued his story. During the few early space expeditions, spacewalks had become extremely difficult for astronauts. Reena intervened. But what is meant by spacewalk? Uncle said, in spacewalks, astronauts go outside their spacecraft and do different science experiments. They also repair or check different instruments that are fitted outside the spacecraft. During a few initial spacewalks, handling even small objects had become extremely difficult. Every time astronauts pushed an instrument or turned the valve, the reaction force would push and turn the entire body of the astronaut. Since there was nothing that the astronauts could hold on to, it was extremely difficult to control their movement and they would keep rotating now and then. Whenever they would slightly push the aircraft, it would apply the reaction force and push them back. After a few such incidents, the space agency realized that they had forgotten the implications of Newton's third law of motion in space. They then started putting capsules and hand locks to the spacecraft to keep astronauts in place during their spacewalks, and then they became comparatively easy and safe. It's so simple, and yet many times we forget about Newton's third law of motion, especially on the Earth, because the gravity and friction of the floor provide stability against the reaction forces. But it can be very evident and difficult to handle in space. Reena promised her uncle that she would share the interesting story with her friends and the message never to forget Uncle Newton and his third law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction.